Happy Tuesday to everyone out there, and welcome to the Fantasy Waiver Wire with yours truly, Lee. Tubby is not with me tonight. He has actually gone away on a nice long trip. He will be gone nearly a month. So congrats to him and his family for having some time off this time of year, especially. I can't say where they're going because that's private, but they're going somewhere really nice. So he may be able to tell us about it when he comes back. That's up to him. But you have me here on the Fantasy Waiver Wire for the next week. And then guess what? I'm going away too. But what I will do is while I'm gone, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. So we will be completely off live stream for 2 weeks. And so what we're planning on doing is I will still come in to the Fantasy Waiver Wire for the subscribers to be able to give them some heads up on some waiver wire targets, as well as some roster ideas for you guys. It's going to be kind of quick hits at the moment because I'm going on vacation as well. I know it's not summer. What the heck are you doing? Well, it's just the way things worked out. I'm going to the Formula One Grand Prix down in Austin, Texas. So I'm going to be having a lot of fun doing that. And I'm going to be with some family and friends and having some nice time off. Kind of enjoying a beverage here. I'm going to be with you guys for half hour, 45 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I'll be able to answer them as far as what your waiver wire targets are for this year, or for this week. I'm sorry, for week 6 in the NFL. And we'll just go from there. This will be a laid back session, just 30 minutes to kind of go over what you should be targeting before everybody else gets to them when that waiver wire clock strikes midnight, and then you're left with, whatever scraps are if you don't make a claim. So again, if this is your first time checking out the Fantasy Waiver Wire, welcome. Basically, this podcast is meant to be just a couple of guys that play fantasy in our own league, providing advice and creating a community of fantasy football fans and friends to be able to share ideas and kind of get the best team that we can. We don't charge any money. We don't have a subscription. We're not doing a Patreon, anything like that. All we ask is that you like and subscribe, like the live streams, subscribe to the channel, so that you can get a insight into when we're going live and on Twitch or Facebook Live or YouTube, or subscribe to all three. I don't care. But it's good to be here. I'm a little bit down because I did end up losing this week, my second loss. I'm not very happy about it. So second loss in 3 weeks. Started out the season, 3-0, actually started out the season 2-0, and I've lost 2 out of the last 3. And this week I lost to Tubby's brother, Marine Raiders, who took me down pretty good, 160 to 121. My projections were extremely high. Original projection was, if you look here, is 151 to 104. I got handled pretty well. It's just the way things turned out. He had Brock Purdy, who went off against the Cowboys defense. Didn't see that. I had a little bit more points from my receivers. I mean, I did have 121, but nothing spectacular. McCaffrey held to 23 points in that Dallas game, which didn't do me any favors. Montgomery had a good day. Hawkinson had a good day. Swift had a decent day against the Rams. Just nothing fell right. The worst thing for me here was the Washington defense. So I took a flyer on against Chicago, and that one just came back in my face. My opponent had the San Francisco defense, who had 24 points, so it didn't work out. I mean, kicker, again, doesn't really matter, but when you're only getting 4 points from your kicker, that's never good, like I said. Hawkinson only 10 points, Montgomery 20, McCaffrey 13, which sucks. So, Ayuk 9 and Olave, getting that from your receivers is never going to be great. So it is what it is. It's another loss. But that brings us to kind of looking at, what kind of players out there this week did well, and just who the fantasy stars are right now before we get into the waiver wire additions, because some people really came back to the forefront, if you will, in fantasy world. Jamar Chase being one of them. I mean, in Yahoo leagues, he's our top scorer this week with 52 fantasy points, which is outrageous. Hadn't seen that kind of production yet, mainly because Burrow's been struggling. But they came together against Arizona to win 34-20, and Chase really became the fantasy star. But I think everybody, if you play fantasy, will agree that the biggest fantasy producer this year was Justin Fields. This week, I'm sorry, is Justin Fields and DJ Moore. I mean, DJ Moore in our fantasy league, had 49 points. I was going against Justin Fields from a quarterback standpoint. Justin Fields had 46.98 points, which is always going to help you out. And neither had done any of that. We know the struggles the Bears have had. I bet against the Bears and played the Washington defense, and I got a whole 1 point in one league and a -1 in the other. So that kind of sucks. So you just never can predict the way things go in the NFL. Now, I want to caution everyone that watches our show. That doesn't mean that you're going to get that kind of production from Justin Fields and DJ Moore. You should probably know that. But it does mean that depending on the matchup, if Justin Fields is on your roster, he can produce big fantasy numbers in a good matchup like Washington. So it's something that bears to keep an eye on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be hoping that, okay, now the Bears are back. That's definitely not it. Who else was really surprising as far as quarterbacks this week was, in the loss to Chicago, Sam Howell had 45 fantasy points. Sam Howell has been producing quite significantly this year. I mean, after the kind of slow start, he had 21 fantasy points, then 32 against Denver, -6 against Buffalo, but then 28 against Philly, and then 45 against the Chicago Bears. So something to look at if you're struggling to find a quarterback within bye weeks. I wouldn't be my top priority, but that was just really interesting that he scored really well. Joe Burrow had a day, 45 points. Also, Desmond Ridder in the win over Houston. The one thing you got to watch, Ridder had probably his best game of the season in that battle, and it was a really good game to watch. But Atlanta has a really good defense, and that doesn't hurt when you're a quarterback that wants to get the ball back and needs to kind of get some points on the board. And Desmond Ridder certainly had that and scored on that. Some other notables that kind of went out this week. Jalen Hurts had a pretty good game, 41 points. As far as from a wide receiver standpoint, we talked about Jamar Chase and DJ Moore. Tyreek Hill, of course, went off with that bomb shot. He had 32 points in our league. Adam Thielen, again, is still consistently producing. George Pickens had a game against Baltimore again. One of the rare times Pickens has put up fantasy numbers. Looking at his stuff for the year, 8 in week 1, 22, 11, and 5. So if you had George Pickens, you probably didn't even start him against the Baltimore defense. But if you did, he had 26 points, so that's pretty good. Gabe Davis had another solid day. I keep having him on my bench. I'm going to rectify that this week. The last 4 weeks, Gabe Davis has put up 21, 10, 15, and 22 points in the last 4 weeks. So kind of got to start looking at Gabe Davis. I've had Chris Olave and Ayuk in there since the beginning. And now I think I'm just going to have to shake up the roster and just go into matchup heavy. DeAndre Hopkins finally had a day. He had 22 points. Before then, he had 8, 7, and 10. So if you have DeAndre Hopkins and you saw that game with the Titans that lost, that they took to the Colts, another good game. D-Hop had a pretty decent day. So interesting from the wide receiver standpoint. From the running back standpoint, high scores this week. Travis Etienne in that win by the Jacksonville Jaguars London on Sunday, early Sunday morning, 25-20. He had 36 fantasy points this week. So if you had started Etienne, which you probably should have, you did pretty well. Zach Moss, I was playing against him in one of the other leagues. So actually, I was playing on him in this league, in this Yahoo league, and my opponent, Marine Raiders, didn't have a running back to speak of. His running backs were injured or on a bye. Picked up Zach Moss off the waiver wire literally within an hour before start time, and he's the second highest scoring running back. That's kind of luck that you can get in fantasy football that can kind of screw you over, and that's kind of luck that I had on Sunday. Just wasn't my day. Breece Hall had 28 points. Here's another one. I like to call him A-Chain because I like to call him after A-Train on the boys, but Devon Achane, he had 21 points and got injured, and so he's hitting the injury list. He's going to be on there on injured reserve for at least 4 weeks, and that's a shame because he is really one of the fastest players out there, and it just all that speed on the Miami Dolphins will take a hit And that brings us kind of into looking at that waiver wire. We'll start with the running back position because Chan goes out with a knee injury, and it's looking like he's going to be. It's not going to be season ending, but he'll at least be out 4 weeks since they're putting him on injured reserve. So you got to look at, well, if you don't have Raheem Mostert, which you probably don't, then Raheem's going to get a lot of those carries that Ichan was vulturing from him. But there's also somebody going to be on the waiver wire, probably one of the biggest targets on the waiver wire this week, and that is Jeff Wilson Jr., who is coming back off his own injury, and with just something that you're going to have to really look at. He was activated off injured reserve. He has a 21-day practice window open. He may not get a start this week. He was put on the injured reserve right before the season started, but with Achane dealing with a knee injury, he's going to step in that reserve role. So somebody to take a flyer on. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work, that it'll work out for you, because this is one of those things like you're really just trying to pick up somebody off the waiver wire that can help make your team better. And he's probably the number one target from a running back standpoint. Another one is Roschon Johnson. Again, he's rostered, according to our Fantasy Pros expert website, he's rostered in only 39% of leagues, which I find hard to believe because we've been telling you guys to pick him up for a while. And if you haven't, and then that's on you. But it finally, we had that injury with Khalil Herbert, might be missing some time. Roschon himself left the game with the concussion, but right now he's Khalil Herbert's ankle injury. It looks like it's going to put him on the IR, and Deontay Foreman and the newly acquired Darrynton Evans that's all they have for the Bears on their roster. So Roschon is going to be the guy probably in Chicago if he clears concussion protocol, and he probably should before the next game. Another big loss as far as injuries. Sorry about that. My beer keeps hitting my microphone, so I'm going to have a drink. Cheers. Another big injury that occurred this weekend, which is disappointing, is James Conner in Arizona went down. And that's not good for the Cardinals. But, James Conner, if you had him and you ever had him before, you know that he does get injured occasionally. And it's something that you probably should have expected. But Amari DiMercato is the guy in Arizona that looks to be the one that's going to be stepping up and taking those carries since Conner is going to be out. He rushed for 45 yards and a touchdown on 10 carries in their loss to Cincinnati, and he did catch one of his 3 targets. He's definitely going to be the bell cow there. They don't really have a lot. So again, another knee injury. It's crazy this season. I don't think I can recall a season where we've had so many players go down early on. And if you're playing fantasy, that's just a death knell. So I think we've all kind of at this point been struck with some sort of injury to our fantasy team, and we just got to deal with it. So this kind of going to that waiver wire, even if you haven't had an injury on your fantasy team, you should be looking at the waiver wire just to prepare for it. And that brings up the next player that's kind of on my radar as far as somebody that I'm looking at really heavily. And that's Tyjae Spears. We recommended him last week. I think Tubby picked him up in our league, but in my other league, I have Derrick Henry. And if you watch the Tennessee game, you'll notice that Tyjae Spears outperformed Derrick Henry this week in a reserve role. They had about the same amount of touches, but Tyjae Spears had a really explosive game and actually scored his first NFL touchdown. He had 11 touches, 69 yards. And Derrick Henry's fully healthy. But here's the deal. If you have somebody like Henry like I do, then you've got to worry about a guy like Tyjae Spears because, number one, he may take Henry's job. Henry's up there in years. He's the bull. He's the guy that is there like every down back. But Tyjae's explosive, the rookie is. So if he's available in your league right now, I show him as being 28% rostered in most leagues. Then Tyjae Spears is somebody that you want to look at. Another interesting development is in Carolina. We've had this guy up and down. Last year, he was a favorite to pick up off the waiver wire. didn't really explode for a ton, but he did help some people out a little bit. But Chuba Hubbard in Carolina, if you're watching the Panthers, you notice that Miles Sanders was brought in as a free agent. Being an Eagles fan, I'm familiar with Miles, but I know he's never been an every down back. I think that Carolina wanted him to be. That experiment's kind of come to an end because initially Chuba was not getting a lot of looks, but now they're starting to level out. Chuba on Sunday had 9 rushes for 35 yards and caught 1 target for 0 yards, and their loss to Detroit. Now, while that was a bad loss, it kind of gives you an idea that going forward, that the running back situation in Carolina is a little bit more up in the air than we thought. So Chuba Hubbard might be someone to go to. Some others out there, Deontay Foreman in Chicago. Like I said, I mentioned the situation there with Roshan Johnson. Deontay Foreman could get some carries this week as far as because of the concussion to Roshan. Justice Hill in Baltimore, if you haven't picked him up, I think some people did. He didn't do that well, and they dropped him. But against Pittsburgh, he had a really nice day. Let me see what his actual stats were. He had the ball 7 times for 32 yards and a touchdown, and caught each of his 4 targets for 13 yards. And he did lose a fumble, and that kind of hurts. But otherwise, he's done really, really well. So if you're looking at, again, trying to fill out that roster, then you may want to look at Justice Hill. Again, and another thing happens if it depends on where you're at in the waiver order. If you're low down on the totem pole, then you may want to kind of set up for some of these guys lower on the list. Some others, Anthony Gibson had a pretty decent day in the loss to Chicago. Kendre Miller is still out there in New Orleans, and Tank Bigsby in Jacksonville, but those are kind of on the lower end. I can guarantee you after the waivers clear, those guys will probably be there if they haven't been rostered. Brian Johnson's kind of the guy in Washington, but Gibson has been vulturing some of those carries. Now we're going to look at the waiver wire rankings for wide receiver. Again, with another major injury this week. If you haven't seen it, Justin Jefferson, he suffered another injury, and that's a big loss to a lot of fantasy owners. And right now, they feel that with his hamstring, he's not going to be rushed to be returned from injured reserve. And I think that has to do with the Vikings being 1-4 right now. After the loss to KC, they got Chicago coming up, and then San Francisco. That's probably either going to be 2-5, looking like even if they beat, if they beat Chicago, that's not a given yet. So there is some players out there that might be able to help you if you have Justin Jefferson. I know if you do have Justin Jefferson, that really sucks. So you got to kind of look at who's available. Well, who's filling in for Justin Jefferson? Who's the wide receiver 1 in Minnesota? Do you really want the wide receiver 1 out there? A lot of people would think Addison would be the guy. And Addison is good, but he's never really had the breakout looks that everyone's expecting. So the one that you really have to look at that everybody's kind of on the same page with is KJ Osborne. So you want to put that down if you're a Jefferson owner, or if you just want to get KJ Osborne to keep him from the owner that did have Justin Jefferson and kind of screw them over. Right now, KJ Osborne's rostered in about 21% of the fantasy leagues out there. He is been the number 2 receiver against the Chiefs. He set season highs in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. Minnesota is a pass-heavy offense regardless. They don't have much in terms of a running game. So even if they lose, you're going to expect Cousins and company to put up some yardage. So without Justin Jefferson, it's definitely going to hurt the Vikings quite a bit. But KJ Osborne's the guy that you probably want to target. Another person out there is DJ Chark. The Carolina Panthers had a pretty decent day. He's had 6 or more targets in every game and 13 fantasy points or more in his past 3 games. Adam Thielen's the top guy in Carolina, but Chark's is a pretty decent flex option for deeper leagues. Also, those on a bye, you may want to look at him. I'm still touting Joshua Palmer. He's been more and more rostered since the injury to Mike Williams happened. We're going to find out this week, kind of going into that Dallas game, because Keenan is back. So they're coming off the bye week. We know that Williams is out. We haven't really seen a lot of Joshua Palmer. We're going to see some Quentin Johnston, so that either or. I would lean more toward Johnston as a pickup, but we're really going to see on Sunday. So you don't want to wait until Sunday to see what it is. You need to make a decision, maybe grab one of those guys, because if you ain't got Keenan Allen, you know that Herbert's going to find some guys out there, and it's either going to be Palmer or Johnston. So that will help you out this week immensely in the wide receiver realm, especially if you got guys on bye, Palmer or Johnston. I'm thinking Johnston might get the best, but Johnston's a rookie. He's got the higher ceiling between him and Palmer. So we're going to find out against a really good defense. I know the Cowboys got blasted against the 49ers, but that doesn't mean that they completely suck at defense. They're a really good defensive team that had a really, really, really bad game on Sunday night in prime time. So, yeah, one of those two. Another guy that if you haven't picked up yet is either another twofer here, Josh Reynolds or Jameson Williams. These guys are really more highly rostered. Josh Reynolds, maybe not so much. A lot of people, when Jameson came back from the bye, I didn't see a lot from Jameson in the first game back, but that doesn't tell you that he's not going to be. And this team, outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's going to be another guy. There's going to be a number two guy. Right now, Josh Reynolds has been that guy. So you really kind of make a decision and think, is Williams going to take over that role, or are the Lions going to still run with Josh? If you can get Josh, I would probably take a flyer on him and see what happens. Jameson, to me, it's something that you could watch, but it's kind of like, again, the Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer. It's you go with the Joshes, and you're going with kind of the sure bets, the ones that are established. You go with the rookies, then you have a chance to get a little bit more down the line. So if you've got strong wide receivers, by all means, target Jameson Williams or Quentin Johnston, because those are ones that may pay off in the long run, especially toward playoff time. But right now, if you're looking just to fill a gap and you need points this week on a bye, then you may want to go with either one of the Joshes this week. Other than that, Josh Downs is a guy out of Indianapolis that is looking like he's kind of a consistent day-to-day threat. They have Pittman, of course, who is just outstanding. But now that Gardner Minshew's taken over, you're going to see more passes than you would have with Richardson under center. So I would say Downs is somebody that you could easily target that might fill a gap for you. He caught all 6 of his targets for 97 yards from both Richardson and Minshew last week. They have a strong matchup against a Jaguars defense that just gave up 24 fantasy points to Stephon Diggs and 22 to Gabe Davis. So that's good for you with Josh Downs. It could mean a pretty good day if you want that. So that is the fantasy wide receivers that you have. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll answer them. Tight end wise, there's only one name really on my list as far as tight ends on the waiver wire. It really, there's guys out there. You really just have to look at things. If Logan Thomas is still available in your leagues, he's getting a ton of looks from Howell. He has Howell's clearly now at this point of the season. He's a safety valve. So definitely target Logan Thomas. Right now he's rostered in what appears to be only 12% of leagues overall. And that's just crazy to me. Now I have Sam Laporta, so I don't need Logan Thomas. I'm not trying to brag. I just have him in both leagues. And I have Hawkinson in one and Goddard in the other because I drafted 2 tight ends right off the bat. So I don't need him. But if you're tight end poor, if you've got a guy like Njoku or one of those guys or Gerald Everett, somebody like that, then you may want to look at Logan Thomas as an option at tight end. Lastly, I mentioned the quarterbacks that had a really, really decent day on Sunday. There was some out there that we don't normally see, Sam Howell, Justin Fields, but Justin Fields should still be rostered. And so one of the questions that with Richardson going down, a lot of people would probably ask, is Gardner Minshew worth the pickup? And for me, if you're in a 12-team league, I would say definitely he's worth a pickup. He's definitely worth a look because you know that we don't have a lot of quarterback-heavy rosters on a 12-team league. In a 10-team league, you've probably got a backup or there's somebody better available. But I will say this about Gardner Minshew as a former Eagles fan. The guy can sling the rock. He knows he's an accurate passer. We've seen Minshew for a while. He's a great backup, and the Colts are in a very lucky situation. Right now, Minshew's only rostered in about 1% of fantasy leagues, so he's an easy pickup if you're looking to even just have a backup quarterback for an upcoming bye week. I would grab him now, so that because it looks like Richardson may be out several weeks. Some others that are starting to really ramp up that may not be on somebody's roster, they may still be on that waiver wire, is Derek Carr. Some people dropped him early when he struggled or during this injury that he just had. But I think that his poor performance lately has been due to his injuries and not so much due to the fact that he can't throw the ball. He's still got an amazing roster of talent with Olave, Michael Thomas, and Kamara. So he's got guys that he's going to get the ball to. Jimmy Graham is one of the tight ends there. So I think that if he's available, he's another good, solid backup to have on your roster. Baker Mayfield's another one that I would look at. He's throwing the ball really well right now. Only lost the one game. They're coming off a bye week, so this would be somebody that you might want to check out. So the last game he had, he threw for 25 of 32 for 246 and 3 touchdowns and 1 interception and rushed for 31 yards in their previous one over the Saints. So I would say definitely take a look at Baker as far as somebody that you can target. But let's look at Baker. Who he's got this week is coming off the bye. They've got Detroit, pretty decent defense, but they're banged up in the secondary. They're at home. Baker's been throwing the ball really well. Right now, his fantasy points have been 28, 30, 20 against the Eagles, the one team to really shut him down, and then 40 against New Orleans. So I would say that Baker's is somebody that you may want to take a look at. Another one is Josh Dobbs. If you haven't taken a look at him, the last few weeks, he has had 25 points against Dallas, 39 points against San Francisco. He did only have 13 against Cincinnati, but he's coming up against a Rams team that might have a more favorable matchup for him. The Rams, they've got a pretty decent front seven, but on the back end is where they kind of struggle. So it could be a good day for Geno Smith. But again, all depends on who's available. I mentioned Desmond Ridder earlier as far as quarterbacks. Like I said, up until Sunday with that 45, he'd thrown for 8 points and 9 points respectively. However, Desmond Ridder with that tough Atlanta defense is going up at home against Washington. So again, bye week, this might be the week that you claim Desmond Ridder off of waivers and give him a shot in your lineup. And just to look at Derek Carr's upcoming opponent, if you will, he went for 28 against New England, and now he's going to be at Houston, a little bit of an easier matchup for him, maybe. Houston is really solid all the way around, but at Houston indoors, it's hard to say. I don't know if I would go with Derek Carr on this one this week, but after that, he's got a weaker pass defense in Jacksonville on the week after that, and then at Indy, who was giving up the ninth most points to quarterbacks, and then Chicago, and then Minnesota. So if you're looking for the future, Derek Carr has 4 favorable matchups coming up. So we've gone through quarterbacks, tight ends, running backs, and receivers. We've kind of gone over our top performers of the week. There's really not much else out there unless you want to talk about defenses. If you want to talk about the kickers, but we don't do that here on Fantasy Waiver Wire. You're really kind of on your own as far as that goes. Basically, as far as your defenses, you're going to want to look at who are the weaker teams in the league or any of them left over. I don't target defenses until everything else is done and we make those claims. So if you have anybody that you're looking to grab, that's what you're going to want to look at. You're going to want to hit those guys. And we'll talk to you next time. Now, I'll be back on Thursday to kind of go over your lineups with you, and I'll be happy to do that. So if you want to be on the live, go ahead and tune in. Ask me your questions right away. Put them in the comments what your lineup questions are. We'll do your best to get yourself lineup set before the Thursday night football game. Until then, for Tubby, who is going to be away for a while, this is Lee on the Fantasy Waiver Wire saying have a great night, and we'll see you again Thursday night, 7 o'clock, up till kickoff.